He was standing at the altar next to me on my wedding day, straightening my tie, telling me I was the luckiest man alive. He had been sleeping with my wife for 4 months. He had been stealing from our business for 11. And he smiled right at me in the photos, in every single photo from that day. That smile is what I think about when people ask me if what I did to him was too far. It wasn't. Not even close. My name is Marcus, and this is the story of how I spent 14 months building the most complete and legal destruction of a man's life that I have ever seen. Not because I'm cruel, but because some lessons need to be unforgettable. Ryan and I met when we were 11 years old. His family moved in 3 houses down from mine in Columbus, Ohio. First day of 6th grade, he showed up with the same beat-up Air Jordans I had. We argued about whose were more beat up. We were inseparable from that day forward. 17 years. High school together, college together, same dorm room, same major. When I started my digital marketing agency at 26, Ryan was the first person I called. Not my father, not my girlfriend. Ryan. He came on as co-founder, equal partner. We shook hands in my apartment kitchen over 2 beers and built something from nothing. By the time I was 29, we had 14 employees, 2 major clients, and a company valued at just under $2 million. I was the face. Ryan handled the finances. That was my first mistake. Not trusting Ryan, I would make that same decision 100 times. The mistake was not having anyone else watching the money. Because the thing about Ryan, the thing I never saw, was that he had always been running a calculation in the background. A quiet, patient, devastating calculation. Psychologists call it destructive envy, the kind that wears the face of loyalty so perfectly that you never see it until the moment it removes the mask. I didn't know that term then. I learned it later. In the ruins. It started with an accountant. Our company had grown to the point where we needed an external audit, standard procedure. The accountant, a woman named Diane, called me on a Tuesday morning with a question about a series of transfers. Small amounts, consistent, over 18 months. 200 here, 800 there, nothing that would trigger an alert alone. But together, the pattern was impossible to miss. $63,000 gone from our operating account into a shell company Ryan had created 8 months after we started the business. I remember sitting in my car in the parking garage for 45 minutes after that call. Not crying, just still. I didn't call Ryan. I called a lawyer. And then I called the private investigator a friend had recommended the year before, half as a joke. What he found over the next 3 weeks was not a joke. The business fraud was just the beginning. Ryan had been meeting my wife, Claire, twice a week for 4 months. Hotel, same hotel, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. I had been working late on Tuesdays and Thursdays for 6 months. Ryan had suggested I put in the extra hours. He had suggested it. I want you to understand the architecture of this. Ryan didn't stumble into this. He constructed it. He moved the money slowly so no one would see. He recommended the schedule that gave him the access. He stood next to me at my wedding with the full knowledge of what he was planning. Oxford researchers who study male betrayal say the brain processes this kind of targeted, premeditated betrayal differently from impulsive betrayal. It activates the same neural pathways as a physical ambush. Your system reads it as a predator, because that is exactly what it was. Ryan had been my predator for over a year, and I had fed him, sheltered him, and called him my brother. I spent a week unable to sleep, and then I did something that changed everything. Instead of confronting Ryan, I started reading. I read everything I could find about betrayal, about envy, about what makes a person capable of this. Here is what I found. Sociologist Helmut Schoeck spent decades studying what he called destructive envy, the specific psychological pattern where someone desperately wants what you have, masks it with friendship, and eventually cannot resist destroying you. The warning signs are almost invisible. These people celebrate your wins loudly. They are always the first to congratulate you. Because the performance of happiness for you is what allows them to keep the envy hidden, even from themselves. Ryan had celebrated every single success I had, more loudly than anyone. I had seen it as loyalty. It was inventory. He was keeping track of everything I had that he didn't. And the most chilling part, the part that kept me awake, was the Brutus delay. Game theorist Robert Axelrod studied hundreds of business betrayals and found one consistent pattern. The most dangerous betrayers do not act quickly. They wait an average of 14 months from decision to execution. Ryan had been my business partner for 3 years before the first transfer. He waited. He planned. He positioned himself perfectly. And then he struck at exactly the moment when I was most vulnerable, distracted by a new marriage, a growing company, and complete trust in the person handling the money. When I understood all of this, I made a decision. I was not going to confront him emotionally. I was going to respond the way the Medicis responded to betrayal. Silently. Patiently. Completely. I said nothing to Ryan for 14 months. 14 months of shaking his hand at Monday morning meetings. 14 months of sharing lunches. 14 months of asking about his family, while I built the case. Step 1. I quietly retained the best fraud attorney in Columbus. We documented every transfer, every pattern, every shell company transaction. $63,000 with a paper trail so clean it would have made Diane the accountant weep. Step 2. I reached out to 3 of our major clients privately. Not to complain, just to strengthen the relationships. To make sure those relationships were with me, not with Ryan. 2 of the 3 had always dealt more with me anyway. The third took 3 months of dinners. Worth every one. Step 3, and this is the one that required the most discipline. I said nothing to Claire. I know that sounds strange, but I needed her behavior to stay natural. Any change in her routine would have warned Ryan. I needed him comfortable. I needed him to keep walking into the building every Monday, thinking everything was fine. Step 4. 6 months before I was ready to move, I quietly bought Ryan out of his equity stake. Not forcibly. I proposed a restructure that gave him a cash buyout. He thought he was winning. He thought he was taking money from a man who didn't know what he knew. He signed the papers on a Wednesday. He was no longer a co-owner of the company he had stolen from when he left that building. Step 5. The following Monday, I had the fraud attorney deliver a civil lawsuit and a letter to his home address. The same day, I had a conversation with Claire that ended our marriage. The same day, I sent a single message to Ryan's father, a man I had known for 17 years, a man who had called me a second son, with nothing but the documented evidence. No commentary, no demands, just the facts. Ryan's father called him that evening. I know because Ryan called me at 11 p.m. I did not answer. I have never spoken to Ryan again. Within 8 months, the civil case was settled. Ryan paid back every dollar, plus legal fees. Within a year, 2 of his subsequent business attempts failed, in part because word had traveled in our industry.